Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Sarah Avery, and I am the Executive Director of Quanta Change. Thank you so much for joining me today. I wonder if you've ever heard someone say this, maybe you even said it yourself. Um, why is it that I married my mom? Or why did I marry my dad? Oh my gosh. Um, Maybe all of a sudden you have noticed a similarity, either in your partner or maybe your friend or your boss or coworker, someone pretty close to you in your life, and you think, wow, they seem a lot all of a sudden in some way like my mom or my dad, maybe even an older sibling or a grandparent, somebody else who was pretty important to you growing up, and you're noticing that there's some real similarities. Maybe you're even seeing a pattern in your relationships of being with that kind of person. Maybe it feels like it's everywhere in your life. So if this resonates, you're not alone. This means that you're human, and this is actually how it works. This is kind of how life works, and I'll explain what I mean by that today. But I just want you to know that it's very normal if you've just noticed it and you're feeling a little weird about it. So maybe this isn't a good way. Maybe you've noticed that your partner or your friend or your boss is somehow supportive, nurturing, some really great quality that is reminiscent of one of your parents or other early caregivers. If so, that is wonderful. You have chosen well. You've ended up in a good relationship of some sort, and that is fantastic. More often, what I hear is, ugh, they're like my parent or somebody else in a really icky way. Maybe they're dismissive, critical, abusive, controlling, or some other negative characteristic. Maybe you even see a pattern, say, in your romantic relationships or in your friendships or in work relationships that really you think, whoa, this just keeps happening. Um, yeah, if that's so, that is not your fault. And I'll explain again why this happens today. But I'm wondering if you've tried to change this. If it's a negative characteristic that you keep seeing happen in your relationships, have you tried to change it? Sorry, itchy nose. Have you tried maybe therapy or some kind of self-help work? Maybe you've learned how to stand up for yourself better. Maybe you've learned how to set boundaries. Maybe you've learned to notice red flags and steer clear of a certain kind of person. Has that helped? Are you finding that your relationships with that kind of person are more functional, more beneficial to you, more supportive of you, or you're more able to take care of your own needs while you're in that relationship? If that's the case, that's fantastic. That's really great. If not, if you found that the things that you've been trying to change that pattern in relationships hasn't worked, it's not your fault. It's not because you haven't worked hard enough or done enough of whatever the method is. It's really because that method that you've been trying has not been able to get rid of the learned distress that keeps putting you in that same kind of relationship. So let me explain what I mean by that. So learned distress is the quanta change term for the feeling that you absorbed very early in life that there's something wrong with you being just the way that you are. You absorbed it from the people around you and how they felt about being themselves, the ways in which they felt that there was something wrong with them, then negative situations and moments that they had. You were absorbing how they felt, and it became how you felt about being yourself in the negative sense, and the feeling that there's something wrong with you. And so as you are absorbing this learned distress before the age of 2.5, before you ever have any rational brain starting to operate, you had no choice in the matter. You were absorbing that, and your brain was also as you were absorbing that icky feeling, your brain was developing a survival mechanism to allow you to cope with, control, manage that learned distress, that awful feeling. It also allowed you to fit well, sort of like a puzzle piece with your parents, other early caregivers. So that survival mechanism and your learned distress are contained in your sense of self. This is the part of your brain that stores how you feel about being yourself, and your sense of self becomes the automatic generating force behind all of your situations, your conditions, your moments, your relationships. So that's to say that sort of like your sense of self says, okay, you little puzzle piece out in the world, still the shape that you are. We got to find you some more puzzle pieces to fit with you. And so your sense of self generates relationships with people that feel the same way as the people that you felt early, that you were around early on. Yeah. So this is why you keep finding yourself in relationships that feel those same ways, and good or bad, negative or positive. And in the case of relationships, very often we just really notice more the negative qualities and the negative characteristics, and that's natural. It's to help us try and fix those things, try and help ourselves change and fix what feels wrong. Unfortunately, the sense of self just keeps finding us new people that are a lot the same. So maybe you've heard something like this before. You're thinking, yeah, I've heard this before, maybe in some different language, but I know this, I understand this. So if that's the case and you haven't been able to change it, then that sort of begs the question, why haven't you been able to change it if you really understand exactly what I've just been describing and why that's been happening? Well, it's because of something that Quanta Change calls the rational brain roadblock. This is the phenomenon by which, when your rational brain is operating, there is a wall of protection or resistance to change around your sense of self. It protects your sense of self and your survival mechanism because it says, this is how you survive. You're not going to touch it. You're not going to change it. And that's understandable. Unfortunately, when part of your sense of self, part of your survival mechanism is this negative stuff that keeps putting you in the same negative situations all over again, it's super frustrating, right? So that's really to say that you cannot understand your way out of learned distress. You can't think your way out of learned distress. But fortunately, the Quanta Change process was actually developed to get through the rational brain roadblock and get to your brain at a time when you could actually change this stuff. So the way that it does that briefly is that Quanta Change works with your brain during sleep. And that's for two reasons. One is that sleep is when your rational brain is entirely shut down. So that's when the rational brain roadblock is deactivated. That wall of protection around your sense of self that keeps it from being changed is deactivated while you're asleep. The other reason for sleep is that sleep is when your sense of self, how you feel about being yourself, is getting recharged. Just like you plug your phone into a wall socket, you are recharging your sense of self every night when you sleep. So what Quanta Change does is it allows you to tell your brain while you're sleeping that you want to recharge, not with learned distress anymore, which is basically what you've been recharging with every night of your life. You want to recharge with your core well-being. This is the feeling at your center that you are just great being yourself, that you matter just for being yourself, that you have all of the resources that you need, that life can be good, that being you is good. So as you recharge with well-being instead of learned distress, your brain peels off layers of learned distress permanently. And your core natural well-being expands to take the place that learned distress was sitting. So as you can imagine, you feel better and your life starts to work better. And in the case of what we're talking about today in relationships and these negative relationships patterns, nearly all of the learned distress that lies underneath relationships is the feeling that we don't matter, just being ourselves. So we're peeling off layers of I don't matter. What's replacing it by just natural expansion is your core feeling that, like I said, you do matter just for being yourself, not for being some certain way, not for appeasing other people, not for making sure they're okay, but just for really being yourself. That's why you matter, just because you exist. And so some more specific ways in which I see change happen in this realm, you start to know really deep inside yourself in a new way that you haven't experienced before, that your well-being is your sustenance, that your survival does not come from being a certain way, like I said, from making sure they're okay, making them happy, appeasing people, making sure everybody around you is okay, maybe making sure they do everything a certain way. Your well-being is your sustenance. You've got you, instead of feeling like I have to be this certain way to somehow elicit a certain response from other people. And so that's one big change I see. And that really frees you up to really look after your own needs more, really take good care of yourself in a way that you haven't been before, to really focus on what matters to you. Another change that I see happen, so let me say something sort of ungrammatical here. People treat us how we feel. People are automatically responding to how we feel about being ourselves, and we're automatically responding to how they feel about being ourselves all the time. And so the more you feel like you matter, the more people respond to you with, hey, you matter. You start to maybe become more visible in a way that feels really good to you. People start to treat you differently, treat you like you matter. Even people sometimes who have been in your life for a long time and you're used to being treated a certain way, or in the case of seeing the same kind of person come into your life, either that same kind of person starts to treat you like you matter, or the last thing I'll say in sort of general terms is that sometimes it's different people come into your life, and they're a different kind of person, and you find that your life changes in that way. So let me give you a couple of specific examples from my clients over the years. So the first one I'll give you is an example for someone who saw the people who were already in her life really change in their behavior towards her. So, and that always brings about then other people coming in and treating someone differently, because once you've changed at the core, then everyone can respond differently to you on the basis of how you feel. So this client, we were starting to work on this big I matter thing, and she said, well, okay, I understand that I'm gonna feel different, but my ex-husband and his wife, they're never going to treat me differently. I mean, Sarah, I'm dealing with this all the time because of our special needs son, and it's just exhausting. They're kind of awful to me. And I said, well, okay, we'll see. So I wonder if that's the case. If you're thinking about someone in your life, you're thinking, this person will never, ever, ever change how they treat me. It's just how they are. Maybe it's a family member or coworker, boss, someone you really can't just walk away from, and you're thinking, yeah, they're never going to treat me differently. Well, I've heard that a lot, and sometimes that's the case, but more often than not, I've actually seen changes in how even those people treat my clients. So my client unlearned some learned distress. She came back to me, we had another call, and she said, well, wow, Sarah, this has been a really strange couple of weeks, because my ex-husband never even treated me this well when we were married. And his new wife just sent me this incredible email just kind of gushing about how I handle our special needs son and how she wants pointers from me about how she can be better with our son. And Sarah, these are like miracles. I didn't change how I talked or how I behaved. I didn't do anything differently. And suddenly they're really treating me very differently. So I see that all the time. I know it maybe sounds like, yeah, right. How can that even work? But this is what I've been seeing for the past 22, almost 23 years in working with people through the quantum change process. So let me give you another example. This is an example of someone who kept running. She's somebody who in her family, her mother, her father, and her older siblings who were quite a lot older than she was, were just really horrible to her. She grew up in an extremely abusive and neglectful and coercive kind of household. So she kept running into people, especially who were like this one older sister. And she kept running into them and having them as bosses in her work, which, as you can imagine, is just awful to have to go to work every day and just feel like you're in this sort of Groundhog Day with this older sister who was just awful. And so I wonder if that's what you've seen, if you've seen this same kind of person just keep popping up all over the place in every kind of relationship in your life, or one specific kind of relationship. So we were working in I Don't Matter, and she just felt like locked in. It's a good job. It's, other than this boss, everything was fine. But she just thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And then, well, kind of miraculously, this boss happened to get pregnant, and she went on maternity leave. And my client was so happy. And in the interim, she ended up having this new manager who was completely different than any boss she'd ever had, completely different from this regular boss for her, supportive, trusted my client, listened to my client, said, oh my gosh, you're doing such a great job. Let's do things your way. Gave my client all the resources she needed to do all the work, which resources that her regular boss had been withholding. It was like night and day. And she was so happy, and she was also so dreading the moment when her regular boss came back from maternity leave. So it happened. The regular boss came back from maternity leave, but when she did, she announced that they were going to reorganize the group. And what happened when she reorganized the group was that everyone else stayed under the old boss, but my client ended up keeping her good boss. I know, you're probably cheering right now. I mean, it makes me so happy to think about that when that happened. And so she got to keep this great boss. And even though the old boss was there and in the background, really life was so much better for her. And as usually happens, she was also seeing other places in her life where either new kinds of people were popping up, or people who'd been in her life for a while were treating her a bit differently. So it generally happens in lots of places. I'm just giving you a little bit of a snapshot here. So I hope those examples give you a bit of hope that if you've seen really negative relationships repeating in your life, especially, that there is a way to stop that. There is a way to change that. I have seen it so many times. So if you're interested in seeing if that's a possibility for you, the first thing to do is find out which survival mechanism and pattern of learned distress you have. There's 6 of these patterns, and you can find out for free which one of them you have. These patterns are called the idealist, the perfectionist, the optimist, the defeatist, the caregiver, and the dictator. Sometimes that one's called benevolent dictator, depends on the person. To find out, so let me say that first, that the reason that you're finding out which pattern you have is not just to dive more into where the problem came from. It's not to just examine that or immerse yourself in another explanation of where the pattern came from, because I know lots of people come to me and say, Sarah, I've done 20 years of therapy. I've done 30 years of therapy. I know where this stuff came from. I know about my childhood. I know all that stuff. I've examined this pattern, these sources ad nauseum. I cannot take any more of this. It's got to change. Well, quanta change is all about changing things. What you're doing by finding out which of these patterns you have is finding out what you're going to be peeling layers off of through the quanta change process so that you can uncover your core well-being, your uniqueness, the part of you that feels great about being yourself, and the part of you that gets to express itself in the world and be and enjoy your life. So in order to find out which pattern you are, you're going to go to my website and take a free, in-depth, scientifically validated personality test. This measures your learned distress, and I'm going to graph it for you and send you a personalized report with your pattern or patterns of learned distress, your survival mechanism, how you've been surviving with that learned distress, and how quanta change tends to help people with that pattern really feel a lot better and very different. So the way that you find out, you take that test is you go to my website, Quanta Change, QUANTA, change.com, and click on the free report button and fill out the report or fill out that test, and I will send you your report. So I hope that you're feeling a little bit hopeful. I know what it's like to be in this repeating cycle of negative relationships in some way and how miserable that can be. That really can change. So thank you so much for joining me today and finding a little bit more about quanta change. And I hope that you will join me again next week for another way that quanta change really can help you feel good being you. Thanks so much.